So let's talk about this Analyze Data feature in Excel. If you look at your Home tab, and if you have not modified the position of things on your Home tab, you will usually find it off to the right here. There's this analysis group, and there is a button, a single button that says Analyze Data. Before I show you what that does, I want to tell you a few limitations. First of all, this Analyze Data feature sends data to an API to try to determine insights from your data. As such, it will not work if you are offline, and I will show you that. I'm going to disconnect my internet. You can see now that it says no internet access, and if I try to use the service, it says we gave it our best try, but we can't find any suggestions because you seem to be offline. Try connecting to the internet. Okay, let's try that. I'll reconnect. And once it's connected, we'll try again. And now it works. Okay, so we'll get into the details of what all of this is in a moment, but first I want to talk about a few other limitations. First of all, there are limits as to how much data you can send to the API. So in this version of the table, I've got 73,333 rows and 24 columns. Now what determines what is too much is dependent on a number of things. First of all, how many rows, how many columns, but also the uniqueness of the data. If I had a unique value in every single cell in this table, the number of rows that would be too many rows would be far fewer than 73,000. But in this example, for this data set, I found that it was this number of rows that was too many. And if I try this now, you'll see too much of a good thing. You may have too much data selected to come up with meaningful suggestions. Try selecting a smaller set of data and try again. Okay, so if you've got too much data, it won't work. Generally, I wouldn't think that you would have too much data. There are other limits. If you've got too few rows, similarly, it won't work. Now, not that you would really ever try to do this, but if you try to do it with one row, there's nothing to compare it with. So of course it won't work. We couldn't find any patterns. We couldn't find any significant patterns in your data to make suggestions. Try using a larger data set with more variation in it. And that's perhaps a bit obvious. Similarly, if you don't have enough variation in a decently sized table, so this actually has 5,000 rows in this particular table, but there's only one column, and I think at most two values. And if I try that, it will come up with the same message. So we couldn't find any patterns. So the lesson here is that you need to have enough variability, which means enough columns and enough rows, and not too much data in order to use the service for now. So with that, let's go back to the 5,000 row data set. So I've filtered this to 5,000 rows so that we can actually look at what Analyze Data does. So let's hit this button. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is there are some sections here. It's got some suggestions, some suggested questions, and then there's a text box. But before we look at that, I want to show you this settings cog over here. If we click on that settings cog, you can see that there is a list of all the columns in the table. And next to each column is a checkbox where you can select or deselect a column. There is a drop-down list where you can change from not a value to sum or to average, depending on how you want the default behavior to appear for that column. So for all of these are actually okay the way they are. I'm going to leave them with the exception of flight distance, which I'm going to change to average, departure delay again to average, and arrival delay to average. So I've changed those. Everything else I'm leaving the way it is. If it says not a value, it will suggest these as grouping fields and generally will not try to aggregate them unless you specifically tell it to. So let's click OK, update. And you can see that by changing the default aggregation for flight distance to average, I now have average of flight distance in this suggestion here. So when you first open Analyze Data, you get some suggested items. Here we've got a suggested pivot table, which is flight distance by class, gender, and satisfaction. We have average of age by departure and arrival time, convenience, and gender, and so on. We've got a few more here. Here's one where it is filtered class business has noticeably higher flight distance, which is probably to be expected, but notice that it has highlighted the largest bar and also colored the text for the largest bar. And you can see that there are 10 more results here. Show all 10 results. So those are the initial suggestions. But in addition to that, you've got some questions here, suggested questions, and if you click on one of these, it will change the suggestion, so it will bring up the answer for that question. But if you put your cursor into this text box, you can see that there are some suggested questions here. And additionally, if you hit this green button, you can get them as well. But the first thing I want to show you is a construction of a question where you use the word insights and a measure in order to get some suggestions. So I'm going to type insights for arrival delay. So you type insights, the word for, and then the name of a measure. And when I say measure, I mean anything that's a sum or an average. So let's try that. Okay, what have we got here? For satisfaction satisfied, class business has noticeably higher arrival delay. Okay. For check-in service 4, seat comfort 4 has noticeably higher arrival delay. And there are some more charts, more insights. Some may be more useful than others. But the point is, you can use this insights for and then the name of a column to get some suggestions. Let's try something else. Let's try insights for satisfaction. Okay, based on your question, we didn't find any insights that would match the answer. Now the reason for that is because we made some changes to the aggregation method on some of the fields. Now, flight distance, departure delay, and arrival delay we changed to average from sum, but if we change them back to sum and update, and then try again insights for satisfaction, this time it works. So you can see it's come up with a few insights, a few suggested charts, mostly donut charts, I'm not sure why. Now I just happened to find that changing it back to sum was what fixed that, but that's not necessarily going to be the case for your data set. So what I would just say is, if you run into that message that says we couldn't find any insights, it could be because you don't have the right kind of aggregation method on some of your measures. So it's worth trying to change it to see if that gives you different results. But it's also worth noting that we can't find any insights could be that there are no interesting insights for the aggregation methods that you found. And that's interesting in itself, I would say. So let's change something else here. Let's try something else. Let's try this one. So percentage of total arrival delay for each type of travel. Okay, so what have we got here? Showing percent of total arrival delay by type of travel. Percent of total arrival delay by type of travel. Okay, so it's used, because the default on arrival delay is sum, it's calculated the percentage of the sum of the total arrival delay by each type of travel. So personal is about 31 or 32%, and business is everything else. So it's interesting to perhaps note that it's put the word total in here, and it's used the default calculation. We can actually modify this to be more close to what we want. If we put the word, the letters AVG in here, and try that instead, you can see that now we have average of arrival delay. Trying to do that percentage of average, of course, wouldn't work because that doesn't actually make sense. What is the percentage of an average? It doesn't make sense. So another thing that we can try here, let's get a bit more of an interesting grouping field and change this to satisfaction. Average arrival delay by satisfaction. Okay, so by default it's in descending order. We have the largest bar at the top, but we can change that to in ascending order, and you can see that now it's showing average arrival delay by satisfaction sorted by arrival delay in ascending order. Okay, and it doesn't have to be that verbose. We can just put ASC instead, and it's still the same, sorted by arrival delay in ascending order. Now we can also change this to by instead of for each. Okay, it's the same, showing average arrival delay by satisfaction sorted by arrival delay in ascending order. What happens if we remove the word by? It's the same. So actually the amount of text that you need to type into these questions is not that much. You can put the bare minimum and it will give you a good answer. Let's try changing this back to descending. Okay, what's happened here? Average arrival delay by satisfaction sorted by arrival delay in descending order, which is exactly what we expected. Okay, let's try something else. Let's try sorting by departure delay descending order. Okay, so now that I've done that, it has changed it to a table, and we've still got sum of departure delay. Let's try average departure delay descending. Okay, so it's still a table. It's sorting it by the average of the departure delay. Now what if we don't want a table? We can actually put as a bar chart, and now we've got a bar chart, but note that we don't see the legend, so it's not actually clear whether orange or blue is the arrival or the departure delay. So let's just check that. We click insert pivot chart, and now we see the legend, and the orange bars are the departure delay, and you can see the pivot table is here as well. So as well as being able to put as a bar chart, we can use other chart types. As a column chart will work as well. Okay, so it's important to note when you're doing this kind of thing, the here's our answer text is really important to read to make sure that you're getting what you want. So this is showing average arrival delay and average departure delay by satisfaction sorted by departure delay in descending order as a clustered column chart, which is exactly what we want. So I think that's really useful. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is that there are ways to filter the data in the same way that you would with a pivot table. So what I'm going to try now is, let's say, average arrival delay by satisfaction by travel type personal. Okay, so what have I got here? Showing average arrival delay by satisfaction, which is on the grouping field, and then for type of travel, personal. So a couple of things here. First of all, by listing the name of a column and the name of the item in that column, I'm able to create a filter on the entire chart as you would with a pivot table. The second thing is that the column name is not actually travel type, it's type of travel, but because it's close enough to the actual column name, Analyze Data has figured it out. So I think that's really good. Let's just hit that, and you can see here that the personal value is in the pivot table as we would expect. Okay, so that's really useful. The next thing I want to talk about is probably filtering data, just basic filtering. So as well as being able to create charts, pivot tables, donut charts, whatever you want, we can also filter the data in quite a simple way. So let's try satisfaction satisfied. So when I type the name of a column and just the name of a value for that column, what it will do is create a filter on the table. And you can see actually that it's got all columns in the suggestion, and it says table for satisfaction satisfied. And if I click insert, this time it hasn't created a pivot table, it's actually created a formula that is filtering the main data table. So you can see here that it is checking for errors, and if it doesn't have errors, it's created a filter formula where it filters the full table for satisfaction equals satisfied. So what I like about this is that it has created this formula for us just by typing 2 words. We don't need to know how to do the error trapping. We don't need to remember how to use the filter function. So that's a really great way of creating a filtered table, and it's nicely formatted as well, including the headers. We can actually extend this and say age greater than 30. And you can see now it says table for satisfaction satisfied where age is greater than 30. And just to show you the kind of formula that is created from that, it's the same error trapping, and it's filtering the table again for numeric age values which are greater than 30 where satisfaction equals satisfied. So we can continue like that and create progressively more complex filter functions without having to remember how to actually type the filter function. We can just use natural language. And for all of the for how great all of the suggested pivot tables and pivot charts are, to me this is probably my favorite part of Analyze Data, because I can just type in what I want into this text without having to remember how to create this filter. I just type in what I want and I get it. And now it's filtered onto a new sheet, suggestion 4, with the formula, with the header, with the description, and I'm done, and I can continue with what I wanted to do. And that is the last thing I wanted to tell you. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions or you want to chat about this with me, please let me know.